It started with some research I did into deaf-blind education in the Soviet Union in the 1960s and 70s. And it has a very specific history. That then later developed into what's going to be a film or a film project. I think I will just start by reading this introduction that I have written for. I wrote a while ago for something else, but that I can adapt it a little bit. I found the film in the archives of the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy of the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow, the name given the institution in the 1990s to reflect a new perspective in psychology and education. The author and exact date is unknown, but it's made sometime in the late 60s or early 70s. It's 90 minutes long and documents the Zagorsk home for deafblind children outside Moscow. The film includes examples of deafblind education, followed by play, school trips, leisure time, and everyday life at the boarding school. It is also unknown for over how long of a period the film was shot, but it seemed to have been made in parts over a longer time. A durational progression is conveyed and exaggerated by a narrative of development from child to young adult. The film begins with a girl slowly learning how to use a spoon. At first, the child is unable to eat on her own. After interaction with a teacher who guides her hand, she slowly learns how to use it. Similar procedures are repeated with other examples. I first learned about what seems to have been the film in a book by one of the school's chief psychologists, Alexander Masharikov. In his book, Awakening to Life from 1979, he writes, "Instruction in the first habits of independent eating were recorded on film and then carefully analyzed. A microanalysis, so to speak, of the training in what at first glance appears as a simple skill reveals a fairly complex pattern underlying the emergence and development of this activity on the child's part, as can be seen from the extracts of this analysis. The passage in the book is followed by a series of reproduced film stills. Masharikov's statement suggests that at least part of the purpose of the film was research-related and meant for internal documentation and study. It took months to locate the film. At first, the archivist at the Institute of Correctional Pedagogy claimed to be unaware of it. After 6 months of following various other leads, I was back where I began, at the Institute. I asked the archivist again. This time it turned out that they did have it, and a couple of weeks later the 16mm film reel was delivered in a black plastic garbage bag with no other information than the title, Talking Hands. I could use it in whatever way I wanted. I was even offered to keep it, but declined, unwilling to take on such a responsibility. The film was scanned and returned to the archive. Only the very beginning of the film keeps this clinical or perhaps staged aesthetic. Arranged examples of teaching methods and learning tools are abandoned as the film moves along and turns towards a more personal and playful mood. Around the same time, Masharikov's friend and colleague, Soviet philosopher Evald Ilyenkov, also made a reference to film, more precisely slow-motion film, in his statement regarding their work in deafblind education at the Zagorsk school, but this time as a metaphor. In the summer of 2014, 37 years after Suvorov asserted, "We see and hear through the eyes and ears of our friends," I would meet him in his home in the Moscow suburb. For a few evenings, we would share meals and speak with the help of 2 translators, from English to Russian, from Russian to tactile signing and back. A slow, fragmented conversation made possible through mediators and translators and marked by misunderstandings and errors. So the following film extracts that I'm going to show is made from these 2 components, the film from the archive and my conversation with Suvorov.
The example of the spoon as an initial and essential object is reoccurring in both Ilienkov and Masharikov.
In this psychology or philosophy, there's this kind of idea that like seeing is not necessarily something that is kind of happens through the eyes, but it's something that happens through relation and activity, relationships with an activity with objects and with people. But objects are kind of carriers or mediators of cultural kind of historical meanings and signs and symbols, and a lot of times they have method attached to them, and the spoon that kind of, it's not only a spoon, but it also has the kind of method that has been passed, that's been like refined over history, that's kind of attached to it. And this idea of like seeing that is like something that is, you know, not necessarily in the eyes, but something that is kind of formed in the mind, that's formed in the mind through relationships with people and with objects, was kind of like a challenge, because it's like, how do you, if you accept that idea, or if you kind of, like, how do you then make a film, because a film is like a visual medium in that sense. Not that seeing is not an activity, it is, but it's only one of many, and it privileges a kind of certain kind of visual one. So, I mean, this is also like the idea of which is also kind of not really expressed in the conversation very much, but it's in the background for me. It's like this idea of, you know, what an image is, and I think this is there's a kind of interesting proposal in this philosophy that an image is actually so an image is this like thing that like appears in the mind, but it's like it's not something that is so it's something that happens through an activity with the outside, but also like in the kind of movement between a subject and an object, or in a relationship and in an activity, but the image is kind of formed as almost as a kind of in the mind as a kind of movement image. So because an image is kind of, so it's like kind of like a continuous process of change or like a transformation. So this idea of image is also something that's like, I mean, it's related to the idea of seeing, but it's something that kind of moves away from the privileging the visual or the eye as a kind of understanding of these things, and yeah, that's kind of what I've been thinking about. So the two clips that we just saw, they're part of a larger material that's maybe 1.5 hours right now, but I will try and cut it down and pick some various interesting parts. I don't know if I have anything more to say. How am I with time? Yeah, it's over? Okay, thank you.